Good afternoon, everyone, and Happy New Year. Welcome again to an episode of Dress and Drinks. My name is Leon Wiebers. I am the host of this webinar series for the Costume Society of America. And thank you for joining us today. This in our ongoing series, Conversations on Dress. And now I would like to introduce our guest for today, Dr. Marian Ann Montgomery. Marian Ann, thank you for joining us. She comes to us as the Curator of Clothing and Textiles at the Museum of Texas Tech University in Lubbock, Texas. Dr. Montgomery cares for over 34,000 objects, likely the largest collection of this type of material at a university in the United States. Dr. Montgomery enjoys making history come alive through these objects. She earned her Ph.D. in Fashion and Textile History, Museum Administration from NYU through the Studies in Costume Institute and Textile Study Room at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. She's been a member of the Costume Society of America since the early 90s and is currently the Secretary of the Southwestern Region. Dr. Montgomery has previously served as the Curator of Fashion and Textiles at the State Museum of Tennessee, Director of Interpretation for the Sixth Floor Museum at Dealey Plaza, Archivist for the State Fair of Texas, which sounds super fascinating, and founding curator of the Director of Exhibits for the Women's Museum. Her current work is Miss America Fashion, for an exhibition catalog to accompany an exhibit of the same name to run December 22nd, 2021 through June 22nd, 2022. And she resides with her husband and dog in Lubbock, where she quilts in her spare time. And before I turn it over to you, Marian Ann, our cocktail for the evening in true Texan form is the Paloma. And to celebrate those who are doing dry January, our alcohol-free version, and a big shout out to Ann Wass for the recipe, is the Palomita. And those are published earlier for us. So with that, Marian Ann, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm super excited to see what you have to share with us today and to talk about this, because of course, Miss America is literally an institution. And so thank you so much. I'm so glad that you're here with us.
Thank you, Leon, for having me. It's very exciting to be able to talk to everybody all across the way, and you've been such a great host. Thank you for figuring out that drink. I would have been a huge disaster. You'd all be having milkshakes if it was up to me.
Those are
I
great
know
too.
that we're. I know when I'm on Dress and Drinks listening, I like to, I might like to think about contacting that person, but I never think about it at the beginning where all of the name is and the email addresses and all of those things. So this information will appear at the end of this presentation as well. The Museum of Texas Tech University is probably a place most of you have never been. It is a huge, diverse, and multifaceted cultural resource with over 8.8 million objects. We have 6 collecting divisions: anthropology, art, clothing and textiles, history, paleontology, and natural history. This building hosts 9 permanent galleries, and we just got one designated for clothing and textiles. So except when we're changing that gallery out, there will always be something from my division on exhibit. We also have 7 galleries that we use for rotating special exhibits that are curated from the museum's collections and also traveling exhibitions. Museum of Texas Tech's Clothing and Textile Division was established in the 1940s. Some of you who are on this call probably knew Betty Mills, who was the founding curator here until her retirement in 1986. She did a tremendous job of establishing this institution and gathering together wonderful pieces. Her strength was fashion history, and she had many allies in the process, women who had married well and who bought designer clothing. May Campbell was here until 2013, and I joined here actually on January 7th, 2014. So tomorrow's my anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. We think, and we've checked this with other institutions, we think that this is the largest collection of clothing and textiles at a university in the United States. And we also have a very extensive research library that's about to go online so that full images out of copyright, out of books that are out of copyright will be available online in the not too distant future. And that's a little bit of our website there. A few of our objects are posted. We hope to get more soon. The Clothing and Textile Division has in its collection fashion from 1830 to the present, primarily women's, as you might imagine, but we also have a strong collection of men's clothing and children's and accessories. We have a strong military uniform collection, and then we also, of course, being at a university, have athletic uniforms and marching band and all those fun cheerleading uniforms too. Often at this program, people ask, what is your favorite piece? Well, one of my favorite pieces is this Molly Parness evening gown, which was worn by Lady Bird Johnson. And here you see her wearing it to the first state dinner that we in our country ever had for a female head of state. That was Indira Gandhi from India, and that party was on March 28th, 1966. And here's a picture of her wearing it and a picture of it in our collection. We also have a very strong quilt collection. Here you can see our current exhibition sort of up there amongst all the dinosaurs that are in our main gallery. We have over 350 finished quilts plus block tops. All of our quilts that we had received prior to 2020 are now on the Quilt Index. If you're doing any sort of research on quilt history and you're not familiar with the Quilt Index, very easy to find it. It's just a straight Google shot, the Quilt Index. And in our materials that are online include 72 by one West Texas quilt maker. And you can see that's the exhibit that's on this screen. Her generosity is enormous and her ability to produce is enormous. But what I think this will do is enable researchers in the future to really see what was happening in quilting in Texas from the end of the 20th to the beginning of the 21st century. And a lot of what happens here is very similar to what's happening throughout our country. And she is also doing, she made so many quilts that we're going to have an online auction that I'll talk a little bit more about in just a few minutes. When we collect, we don't want to just collect the object. This is maybe not the most exciting quilt, but it's a state bird and state flower quilt made obviously before Hawaii and Alaska joined us. But when we collect something, we also want to know about the woman who made it. So I insist that family members give me pictures of the person either who made it or who wore the object, because I feel strongly that our collections are so focused on women's things that we need to collect the women's story at the same time. And so in preserving the object, I also want to try to preserve the legacy of the woman who made that. Here's another fun piece made by Isabel Tanner Sigler, and there she is photographed with her husband. I mentioned we're having an online auction. The woman who gave us 72 pieces that are on exhibit, you should have seen the exhibits, people going nuts trying to find places for all of them. She had another 66 that we could not bring into the collection. And so beginning tomorrow, there will be a link, beginning tomorrow afternoon, there will be a link on our website and her pieces are going to be sold. These are not in our collection, these are 66 others. And all of the funds are going into the endowment I've been building. I've been in our business long enough to watch people at the Denver Art Museum, at the Texas University of Texas collection, and other places. When our strong leaders retire, their positions aren't filled. And many times it's the women's stories that then get short shrift in those institutions. And so for that reason, every speech I've ever given, every book I've ever written, all of the funds have gone into endowment that we're trying to build so there is money here to hire when I retire in a few years. So Linda made these quilts and these will be auctioned online, and we're going to also have an in-person auction for other pieces, 14 different pieces later in February. So
and this is Linda Fisher, correct?
It's Linda Fisher. Yeah, she made these pieces, and you can see she does some traditional things, but she also does some things that have a real art sense to them. So hope you'll check that out. Another thing that people, so what's my favorite quilt? Well, I don't know what my favorite quilt is, but this is certainly one of the most important quilts we own. It's one of the few quilts in existence that shows the southern point of view during the Civil War. Can you see that pelican and that eagle there by that arrow? I'm going to show you that sort of up close and personal. Well, that's the pelican representing the South, not knocking the eagle representing the Union off its pedestal. So that's one example of how it represents the southern point of view during the Civil War. We have a huge collection of cotton sacks. Most of them were pulled together by one woman, but we now have over 5,700 pieces of feed sack material. Now, I will admit that some of them are tiny 2 by 3 inch squares of swatches, but then we have these wonderful dresses and quilts as well. And I think it's the largest collection of printed cotton material in the country. We were shocked when we did this exhibition a few years ago, the number of families that came through and how fun it was for the elders to tell the next generation about their experiences with printed cotton sacks. The book that I'm showing you is available on Amazon. It's through Texas Tech University Press. And almost, if you missed that exhibition, almost everything we had in that exhibition is in that book. One of the more fun pieces from that is this Battle of Britain fabric. And you can see a detail of some of the allies that were partnered during World War II. My favorite part of that is this. It says bad eggs, and it's a picture of Hitler, Mussolini, and Tojo, and it says keep them frying. I just really love the humor of that, and that really, it's certainly a propaganda piece, but an interesting one. We've also recently been given a huge, huge, wonderful collection of needlework and needlework tools, which we've published in this book, Sumptuous Stitches and Tiny Treasures, which is on sale on Amazon. And this is one of our earliest pieces in the collection. It dates from the time of James I of England and Scotland, who ascended the throne on the death of Elizabeth I, of course, in 1603. It has wonderful detail. It survived in beautiful condition. Another piece that came in with that donation is this wonderful embroidered metallic and piece with metallic and silk thread, which we think dates about circa 1590. It was originally used, we think, as a pillow cushion, but taken apart and saved and preserved. The woman who collected this piece also gave us beautiful needlework tools, and I love the chatelaines. Here's one on the left with mother of pearl gold, and then gold on the other on the right hand side. And I just think these are smashing, wonderful things. When Costume Society met in Colonial Williamsburg, one of the most exciting things for me was to meet Melissa Mead, who was demonstrating knotting shuttles, because in that donation came a huge collection of knotting shuttles. We don't use them anymore. You can see that they're about 4 to 5 inches. You can see they're made of beautiful materials, and they're much wider. There's much wider opening on these than you have on a tatting shuttle. They were used primarily in the 18th century by women of means, and the strings that they created of knots are like a string of pearls that they would use to embellish and give 3 dimensions to some embroidered pieces. And so I know that tonight's group really wants to talk about fashion. Currently, we have 2 exhibitions up on fashion. One is Louise Hopkins Underwood, a woman who improved her community and looked terrific doing it. She was a wonderful community leader who died recently, and she bought major designer names that we have that you'll see in the video later. And then the other exhibition is the one that Leon mentioned a little earlier, which is Miss America Fashion. Here's Louise Hopkins Underwood, the way she looked when I met her. And when I did my my job presentation for the interview, I think she went to our director at the time and said, "This is the woman you have to hire." And so that's the other reason we really wanted to make her exhibit, the inaugural exhibit for that space that we've just gotten. And then moving on, I want to talk to you about Miss America Fashion. The picture that's here is the cover of the book. We wanted a cover that said glamour and fashion, but it didn't tell you who the specific Miss America was. I think if you know who Miss Arizona or Miss Louisiana were that year, you might be able to figure out which Miss America it is, but otherwise she was more anonymous and a very glamorous look. The catalog focuses on the research that was the dissertation, swimsuits and evening gowns worn in competition by the women who won the title of Miss America. And how do those gowns reflect what was happening in vogue at the time? Was it current fashion, or was it a little behind fashion? What is the symbolism that we see in the clothes? And Leon, I know that you're very involved in theater design, and so I really tried to learn as much as I could about some of the techniques you all use to include and sort of look at how maybe some of the women have used that in their competition wardrobe. I must tell you, I don't believe, I mean, if you're not very bright and you're not very attractive, you're not going to win the title of Miss America just because you have the best wardrobe in the world. But I think as you get close to the top, the numbers are really tight, and a wardrobe, I think, could help. The exhibition that you're going to see the video of includes loans from major institutions. The Kent State University Museum. When Jean Drusideau was there, she was my mentor at the Met when I was studying under her. They collected pieces worn by Bess Meyerson, Miss America 45, Phyllis George, Miss America 71, and Laura Lee Schaefer, Miss America 72. Those are all on exhibit. You'll see them in the video. When I was at the Tennessee State Museum, I was fortunate to collect work from Barbara Walker Hummel, pieces she wore in '47 as Miss America, and then Kelly Cash as Miss America of 1987, her pieces. The Mississippi Department of Archives and History Museum Division loaned us pieces by Marian Mobley. And sometime those of you that see me at a Costume Society meeting and we're having a drink can ask me about how those particular pieces came to us. It's a great story, but I'm not going to do it on national television or whatever this is on YouTube.
Our humble YouTube channel.
Yeah, you know. The Oklahoma History Center loaned us things by Jane J. Rowe. And actually, when they sent me the list of what they had, I was like, well, yeah, it's a pink gown, but don't you know that's on the back of the cover of her program book? So Jane and I had this wonderful conversation about 2 hours where she went through every piece and talked to me about it. And so now the Oklahoma History Center has a much fuller catalog of what they got from Jane. Shirley Cawthorn, Miss America 1975, the last one to win from Texas, has loaned us her pieces. And then we have an anonymous lender that loaned us a piece worn by Marion Bergeron, Miss America 1933, who came from Connecticut, and then also a piece from Lee Meriwether, Miss America 55, who came from California. So you might imagine being at fashion exhibitions, there's some overlap. Louise Hopkins Underwood wore this Seal Chapman formal, which was purchased at Neiman Marcus in Dallas, for her portrait that her mother insisted she have painted. Louise was married by this time and had already had several children, but her mother was insistent. The family loves the portrait. They're thrilled to have it. And so we just have a replica of that in the exhibit. Lee Meriwether wore, and others as well, wore Seal Chapman designed evening gowns. This is one that we have in the exhibit, and it has a very special significance. Everglaze was a fabric, it's a polished cotton fabric produced by Joseph Bancroft and Sons out of Delaware. All of their archives are now at the Hagley Library and Museum if you want to study them any further. And they were sponsors that came in about the time of the scholarship when Bess Meyerson won in '45, and she received the first scholarship. They would work with designers out of New York and get them to design beautiful dresses for Miss Americas and use the designer's name. So this is one that Lee Meriwether wore. It was designed for her by Seal Chapman. There's a wonderful description of it in the program book from the year that she won. There's some other interesting pieces about it. Now, I think Lee's children wore this a lot because the train disappeared. When it was loaned to us by the anonymous lender, it was torn and ripped, and there was a lot of embellishments that were missing that we had to put back on. It was a great graduate student project, and I worked with her on it. So both of our stitches are in this piece. This is how it looks on our mannequin. And Lee wore this, not only, I want to go back just a second. In this picture, you see the first picture of a Miss America wearing what we know as the iconic Miss America crown. And that was designed by a jeweler on the boardwalk. It is one that every Miss America since then has worn. Some of the jewels are a little different over the years, but it's the same iconic style. And this is the first picture showing a Miss America wearing that new crown. And Lee's wearing this wonderful Seal Chapman dress. And then she also wears it to crown Sharon Ritchie, Miss America 56, her successor, which is the first time that Burt Parks ever sings, "There she is, Miss America," to a new Miss America. Now, if I was really good with technology, you'd hear Burt Parks singing, but I'm not. And so, Leon, I think here's my contact information again, in case you wanted to touch base with me. Email's always the best. And Leon, I think we're ready to move to the video.
Great, and I'm sure we will have tons of questions. I have things I want to talk about.
Welcome to the exhibition Miss America Fashion at the Museum of Texas Tech University. I'm Marian Ann Montgomery, the Curator of Clothing and Textiles, and I started studying the pageant way back when I was a little kid. But my dissertation was on the swimsuits and evening gowns worn at the Miss America pageant. And this exhibition brings together the largest collection of those garments ever assembled in one place. We are thrilled to thank people like the Mississippi Department of History and Archives, which loaned us this wonderful piece designed by Alfred Brosand for Marian Mobley to wear when she crowned her successor, Linda Meade of Mississippi. That was the first time a woman from the same state crowned a woman from the same state as her successor. It wasn't the last time that happened, but it was the first time, and it was two women from Mississippi. Moving on, we have several pieces in the exhibition, and we're going to show you those now. The red velvet cape edged with gold lace at the sleeve was made by women in Atlantic City for Miss America 1933, who happened to be Marian Bergeron, representing Connecticut. We have received this on loan from an anonymous donor and had to restore it. There's gold lame lining underneath, which we didn't touch, but a lot of the gold, a lot of the glass, the green glass embellishment pieces had fallen off and they had to be reattached. It is loaned anonymously by someone who's very interested in seeing that it go to a proper historical institution, probably in Connecticut, where Miss Bergeron was from. So if someone is of interest, they should contact the museum. The purple gown to the left was worn by Barbara Walker. She was Miss Memphis. She was going to Memphis State University at the time, and she was one of 3 women representing Tennessee that year. She became Miss America in 1947. As you might imagine, she was influenced in her clothing somewhat by Dior's new look. Her skirt was fairly full, but not as full as it becomes later by women that are wearing gowns in the 50s. Then the next piece is a Clifton Wilhite piece. So this is the first piece that we can say actually has a designer name on it. It was worn by Marian Mobley in 1958. 1958, when she competed for the title of Miss America 1959. Those of you that are curators might say, well, why did you not put that on a black mannequin like the one that the dress to the next dress is on? Well, I asked the students about that, and they said, well, you know, Dr. Montgomery, it just didn't fit. It was too tiny to get on that mannequin. So this is the piece that Marian wore, and we're so thrilled that Mississippi, the state of Mississippi, has preserved that. The next 3 pieces are pieces that were worn by Jane J. Rowe, Miss America 1967 from Oklahoma, and they've been graciously loaned to us. All of Jane's pieces, you'll see several more, were loaned by the Oklahoma History Center. We were thrilled to work with them. The white dress was one that was given to her by a local department store in Tulsa that she wore for the evening, she wore for the parade, and she commented about it. She said, it's a great dress, but you really can't eat anything in it or your stomach will protrude on it. So wearing it in the open convertible was a great thing. As it turned out, the pageant really liked that dress. And so the store in Tulsa gave it to her, and she wore it in ads for the pageant sponsors such as Oldsmobile. The green ensemble is a piece that she wore for her interview, which was a closed interview with the judges in those days, a very important part of the whole pageant system. And then the blue-green dress is the dress that she wore for her evening gown competition. And she also was crowned in this gown. It was the first gown to be of chiffon and beautiful beading work and set the stage for a style that became very popular later on during the pageant years. When we were selecting the color for the background of this exhibition, it was this dress that we brought in because we felt that if we were going to use a blue, this was the dress that we had to make sure the blue worked well with. The next 4 garments were worn by Shirley Cawthron, Miss America 1975, and she graciously loaned them for this exhibition. The beige piece on the right is the one that she wore for the introduction that they always do with the Parade of States. And this is where she said, hello, my name is Shirley Cawthron, I'm Miss Texas. The students just love the bows on this particular dress. It's a fun piece. The yellow one wasn't actually worn on the stage in Atlantic City, but it was worn by Shirley when she competed in talent for the title of Miss Texas. And the red dress is the one that she wore on the stage in Atlantic City when she played her flute. That was her talent that year. And then the white dress is just really a fairy princess dress. It was designed by Guy Rex. Guy Rex is a well-known contributor to the pageant world, most often known for their work with the Miss USA organization, where they had several Miss USAs from Texas that also went on to become Miss Universe. And Guy Rex, when Shirley got this dress, she actually had just been crowned Miss Texas. She was sent off from Fort Worth to El Paso. It was the very first time she rode an airplane. And she went out for them to design this dress for her to wear. It has yards and yards and yards of fabric in the skirt. And when she walked in it, she just moved so beautifully. This next piece was designed by Stephen Yerrick and was worn by Kelly Cash Miss Tennessee when she became Miss America in 1987. It was her competition evening gown, and really, it reminds me of some of the early goddesses and the statues that, if you think about them, the shape and the design on that of the stripes on that. She said that when they were looking for this dress, they were looking for a white dress. And it was a fairly expensive piece at the time that she purchased it. It was one of those walking chandelier dresses that were so popular at the end of the 80s and into the 90s. It was part of the ongoing of the Reagan administration. And then we continued at the pageant level to wear fully beaded dresses. This is the first fully beaded dress to wear or to win in competition. And Leanza Cornett, Miss America a few years later, was the last one to wear a fully beaded evening gown. There are 5 swimsuits in this exhibition. The two on the right, the pink and the blue, were worn by Jane J. Rowe. The blue one was worn in the preliminary swimsuit competition, but she didn't feel that she looked really good in it. And she had won Miss Oklahoma in her pink and white swimsuit, and so she switched to that for the finals and felt like she got quite good. Well, obviously she won the title, so that was a good switch for her. The hot pink swimsuit was worn by Shirley Cothran, Miss America 1975, and she loaned it to us. She loaned it to us with the fringe cover-up that she wore for the press photos. They all had to wear their swimsuits for the press photos, probably held on the boardwalk, and she wore that little cover-up with it. The white swimsuit is a super suit. It was worn by Kelly Cash when she became Miss America. Kelly talked about the swimsuit because super suits were something from the 1980s. A woman out of Arlington, Texas, Ada Duckett, designed the swimsuit based on a Jansen swimsuit. She altered it, and she made it special for each woman who competed in it. And they got the title supersuit because so many women won their preliminaries or won the title of Miss America in it. But as Kelly Cash pointed out, you have to have a good figure before you can even think about wearing a supersuit. And then the orange one was a supersuit worn later by a contestant at the Miss Lubbock pageant here in Lubbock, Texas. Now, moving on to the Everglaze pieces that we have here. The Joseph Pancroft Sons and Sons Company was an important developer of fabrics out of Delaware. And all of their archives are at the Hagley Library if you're interested in further research. But they became very involved with the pageant around the time of the scholarship in about 1945, and they were sponsors of that. But they also had their fabrics designed by major designers for the women to wear as their official wardrobe. These 5 dresses were all part of the ensembles that were given to Barbara Walker to wear as Miss America in 1947. There are no labels in them to tell us who the designers were. The pink sheath with the huge overlay skirt there, the pink lace piece, actually can be worn as a sheath, or it can be worn with that huge skirt over it. Joseph Bancroft and Sons also designed Barbara's wedding gown, which she wore right after she was crowned, right after she gave up her crown as Miss America. But we didn't borrow that from the Tennessee State Museum. All of these others were borrowed from that organization. The white dress on the right was worn by Lee Merriweather, Miss America 1955. It was designed for her using Everglaze polished cotton. It was designed by Seal Chapman and originally had a train with it, but because it was probably worn by her children, it came to us in a rather tattered shape, lent by an anonymous donor, but we have since reconfigured it, restored it. So we put some of the beads back on it and we fixed the rips on it. It is a piece that should go to an institution in California, preferably one up in the San Francisco area where she was from, as a historical piece, and is loaned to us anonymously, but that donor was interested in seeing if it could go to California if someone hears this and wants to contact the museum. The piece on the left with the beautiful hot pink overcoat and the wonderful Everglaze fabric print, and with the lining is the same print, was designed by Arnold Scazzi. So you can see that the Joseph Bancroft Company, in using Seal Chapman and in using Arnold Scazzi, was getting top designers to work with them in promoting their particular line of fabric. These 6 pieces are all part of Jane J. Rowe's official wardrobe, loaned to us by the Oklahoma History Center. And they were all part of the wardrobe that was acquired for her to wear as Miss America. In the 60s, the Joseph Bancroft Company provided incredible support as far as garments and even chaperones and accompanying the Miss Americas on several trips. And Jane talks about how this was really important in her work. There's, of course, the pink and gray suit, which is actually something she wore during her homecoming when she came back. Her homecoming was at the Texas OU game. And the white suit was something she wore often. The gray cocktail dress she wore to perform as she did this pink ensemble, which she called a very yummy color. The pink that's embellished is to the left there. The lighter pink piece is one that she was photographed in. It was designed by Alfred Bolsand for Everglades, and she was photographed in it for the Everglades ad for the Miss America program book her year. And the gold one was also designed by him, and it was what she wore when she crowned her successor, Deborah Barnes of Kansas. Although the Miss Americas don't talk about their designers in the way a Hollywood starlet does on the red carpet, there are many pieces here, as you've heard some names already. There are many pieces that the women wore that were designed by major designers. And this particular dress was designed by Shannon Rogers. It is on loan to us from the Kent State Museum, as are some other pieces by Shannon Rogers. But this is the one worn by Phyllis George, one of the most famous Miss Americas. It was worn when she made her entrance at the next year's pageant, where she would crown her successor, and it just glitters and sparkles with all of those wonderful rhinestones. But it's a Shannon Rogers design. Part of the work of Miss America, particularly during the Vietnam years, was to go on USO tours. And of course, Miss America was involved in military appearances as early as Joe Carroll Dennison, Miss America 1942, during World War II. These pieces were worn by Jane J. Rowe in Vietnam when she was leading that USO tour for the Miss America group. So Miss America would go as with some state representatives, and they would perform. She talked about the fatigues, which they did wear between appearances, mainly to blend in. But she said, although we thought we looked really cute in them, the audience really didn't like us in the fatigues. And so I took along this cocktail dress, this blue dress that we're showing you, also on loan from the Oklahoma History Center. And she said they were much happier to see us in our dresses. The four pieces here in the center island were worn by Laura Lee Schaefer, Miss America 1972, and they were part of her official wardrobe. They were designed, again, also by Shannon Rogers, and so they are loaned to us by the Kent State University Museum. These two pieces were designed also by Shannon Rogers, and they are part of the Kent State University Museum collection, graciously loaned to us. And they were worn by Bess Meyerson. Bess Meyerson, Miss America 1945, was the first woman to receive scholarship. She was a pianist, and she also was a television commentator for the pageant for many years. It's very possible that she wore one of these or both of them when she was doing her television commentary at the pageant, which is one of the reasons that we included them in this exhibition. And then there was always the challenge. How do you get the woman that wore the garment into the exhibition? And we have chosen to do that by having the program books for each of the Miss Americas, from Jeannie Bartell in 1943 straight through to the last Miss America who had a program book. Of course, Camille Schreier. There will be one for Emma Broles, I'm sure, next year. But this is our way of getting the woman, her face, and in some cases, the gown she wore in competition here into the exhibition. We did bring in some old videos here at the museum so that people could see the Miss Americas being crowned, because it's kind of a seminal moment when they are crowned. And so we were happy to be able to find a few videos online that we could include here, show you how they moved and how they looked. Of course, fashion is always best when you can see it moving and not in such a stationary situation. There is an exhibition catalog that goes with this exhibition. It is available through the museum store and also on Amazon. It is called Miss America Fashion. You can look on Amazon under Miss America Fashion or my name, Marian Ann Montgomery. It chronicles what each woman wore in swimsuit and evening gown from 1921 straight through to Camille Schrier of 2020. And it also compares what they were wearing with what was in Vogue at the time, Vogue magazine, and it discusses the symbolism. How did these garments reflect the ideal American woman as defined by the Miss America pageant in their search for their brand representative? We hope that you've enjoyed this little glimpse into our exhibition and that you will come see us. Thank you for visiting with us today. Louise Hopkins Underwood was a woman who was raised in the Northeast and came to Texas. And she felt that it was very important that the people of Texas have the same cultural opportunities that she had in New York. And she wanted to bring those here for her family, her children, her grandchildren, and the people of Texas. The first piece that we start with is one that really represents her life as a society woman. She was featured in the society papers in Dallas. Her engagement was announced there. Photos of her were plentiful in those newspapers. This first piece is one that she wore after she married and had a few children. It was designed by Seal Chapman, and it was purchased at Neiman Marcus in Dallas for her portrait to be painted for the family to have. This next group of dresses are all pieces that she wore as part of her life as a society woman here in Lubbock. The pink one is a Pauline Trégère. The olive green one is a Sybil Connolly, and it's a very finely pleated linen dress. You might not know Sybil Connolly, but she is the woman who designed the dress that Jackie Kennedy wore when she had her official portrait painted that hangs at the White House. The beautiful silver brocaded dress and coat were very typical of garments being worn in the 60s. And the green dress to the right of that, the light green, is a Bill Blass. As you can see, several of these dresses were just everyday dresses that could be worn for special society events. You might wonder how a woman here in Lubbock was able to get a Bill Blass, a Sybil Connolly, a Pauline Trégère. Well, that was because there was this wonderful boutique called Margaret's. Margaret Talkington had it here in the downtown area, and she knew her clients, and she often would go buying. When she went on buying trips, she would bring back things specifically for several of her clients that she had in mind. When I talked to Louise Underwood's daughters about how they went shopping with their mother, they just laughed, and they said, "We didn't shop, and mother didn't shop. We went to Margaret's. Margaret showed us what she thought was a good dress for us. If we liked it, we then bought all of our accessories there, and that's how we shopped." Moving on, this orange dress with the scarf on it is a teal trainer, and the wonderful long seafoam green jersey knit dress is a Malcolm Star. Louise wore this when she met the captain on one of her cruises that she and her husband took in the Caribbean. And then these four pieces here are really marvelous. It starts on the left with an Emilio Pucci, and then an Adele Simpson, and then the hot pink and black dress. Sometimes it looks like a coat because, of course, Schiaparelli did a piece very much like that for ski wear with the hot pink and the black. But this is a Jeffrey Bean dress that Louise wore for her 33rd wedding anniversary. And then she also wore it to a major party in Fort Worth for one of the major wealthy gentlemen there when Sarah Vaughan came to sing at his important birthday party. And then as we get over to this other side, we are really seeing more of the dresses that Louise wore as she began going to meetings in the community here and also in other communities to see what was a possibility for her in trying to design an art center here, which now bears her name, not because she wanted it, but because a friend donated $1 million and said, "I'll only give you this if you will name it in honor of Louise Hopkins Underwood. But she had many impacts here in this community, far beyond just that one center. There is this wonderful piece here, the blue turquoise piece, that was worn by her when she entertained at home. And although it's not really high fashion as many of the other pieces are in this exhibition, the family was very adamant that we include this piece because it reflected her interest in wearing clothing designed by people in the communities that she visited when she traveled internationally, and also things that she wore at home for entertaining. Next to that is a red and beige piece by Louis Farrard, a wonderful animal print raincoat, and then a Leonard silk dress. Leonard silk dresses were ubiquitous here in West Texas. We have several in the collection. We actually have several worn by Louise Underwood. She traveled with them, and as everyone who has one knows, they traveled really well and they were just beautiful. The sort of gray-black suit is an Oscar de la Renta. We've accessorized it with some of her scarves that her daughter loaned us. And it's a piece that she wore when her family traveled to France. So we have pictures of her wearing this, but it's a wonderful Oscar de la Renta piece. We also received from Mrs. Underwood many hats, pairs of shoes, and purses that she wore with some of these ensembles and with others. Of particular note are these two pair here in the middle, this green on the left and this red embroidered pair on the right, that came to her that she purchased in Rome. She was on a cruise with several singers from the Metropolitan Opera in New York, and they said, "Oh, you have to go to the shoemaker in Rome. They make the most exquisite shoes." And she did, and came back with these beautiful pieces, which she prized, I think, even more than the gold embroidered blue Ferragamo shoes that she also gave to the museum. We have been very fortunate in working on this exhibition to have the support of the family. Her daughters scoured their scrapbooks and their drawers to find wonderful pictures that they shared with us so that we could show Louise Underwood as a young woman, as a young mother, and in her later years as well, when she was having this significant impact that she did on her community. We as Lubbockites are very indebted to Louise Underwood and the things that she did that made our lives better. And she was important in my being here as the curator of clothing and textiles. She came to my presentation. I think she encouraged the hiring of me and gave me this wonderful opportunity to showcase her clothing, which we're thrilled to show as our first exhibit in our inaugural exhibition for the Clothing and Textiles Permanent Gallery here at the Museum of Texas Tech University. Thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you so much. That was just wonderful to see. So many things to talk about, so many beautiful things. So first of all, I have several friends who went to Texas Tech, and I had no idea. I mean, I knew that you had a collection, but I had no idea it was this large. So tell me a little bit more about the diversity of the collection and the scale of it. And is the quilt behind you one of the collection, or is this one that you have made, or tell me all of those things.
The quilt behind me was made by Linda Fisher, and this is one of the pieces that will be in the online auction. It will not be in the online. It'll be in the in-person auction on February 26th here at the museum between 4 and 6 p.m. So it'll be auctioned in person. In fact, it'll be the very end of that auction. Linda has an artistic eye that I don't share. No, this is not one of my quilts, but I'd be honored if it was. The depth and breadth of this collection is amazing. And one of the reasons you didn't know about it was, May Campbell was my immediate predecessor, and Costume Society members that are the generation before us knew of the collection because of Betty Mills. She interacted with Claudia Kidwell, with a lot of Ann Coleman, and others know that name. So when I arrived here and saw some of them at the conferences, they go, "Oh yeah, we know that collection." But May Campbell, my immediate predecessor, wasn't as interested in fashion. The depth is amazing. There are just so many blessings, and I'm fortunate to have some graduate students that work with me, and they're often finding new things, and we're enjoying this project together. We also do a program called Come and See, where the students get to go in the collection and pick a number of objects based on a theme. So 10, maybe 8 or 10 dresses, 4 quilts, accessories, etc. And then it's sort of like stump Dr. Montgomery. See what she can find out about these pieces to tell the world about. So that's kind of fun too, because you see more of the collection that way.
That's fantastic. I I am so interested in the book on Miss America that you have just published, and I'm looking forward to acquiring it and getting it because I've started some research myself in a similar vein, which I'm not really ready to talk about. But I love how you talk about the influence of their dress and on their sort of representation and how they present themselves, whether they were in the cross referencing to Vogue, and whether they were in fashion or behind fashion or where that was. So um, it's just really fascinating, and I'm really looking forward to checking out the catalog and getting that. And I encourage all of you out there, those gowns look amazing, and I wish I had a trip planned to Texas right now so I could come and see the exhibition. But it's open and it's up until June, correct?
22nd, right? 6 months exactly.
June
You
22nd.
know,
Okay.
you mentioned about the influence of those dresses. You know, every time you write an exhibit catalog, you sort of go to the director and say, all right, now here's some notes. Could you write an introduction? And ours came back and of course used some of my suggestions, but he said, you know, with all the people that watched that pageant, more people have seen fashion on the runway, on the stage in Atlantic City than have ever gone to a haute couture fashion exhibit. And so the influence is kind of an interesting one to think about. Certainly the influence is not the same as Vogue magazine that comes every month, but I think there is a bit of an influence there. So that's a good point that you made.
Well, and one of the questions I have about those gowns and the ones that you have have in your you know, either in your collection or on exhibit right now, part of the research that I've been doing in a similar vein, again, I've discovered that many of them were handmade by the women themselves. Have you encountered any of those dresses that were homemade, especially in the earlier part
So,
of the 20th century, the
well,
mid, you know, so I'm
I
very
didn't.
curious about that because each Miss America has very different levels of support. I think Ann Ross posted in the chat earlier that Miss Rhode Island was like, you know, we don't have any support, and so she had to find different things. So each Miss America from each state has varying levels of commercial support, to my understanding.
When I started this project, Barbara Hummel, Miss America 47, said, if you're going to write about us, get to know us. And so I interviewed and have a, either a survey form or a phone interview with every Miss America who was alive during my period of study, 1921 to 87, who was alive in 1993.
Wow.
So I can tell you that Lee Merriweather's competition evening gown was made by her mother, but I don't know of another off the top of my head that was made by the woman herself. The coronation robe made for Marion Bergeron, apparently in the 30s, the women of Atlantic City, some group of women, came together to make those coronation robes for the Miss Americas of the 1930s, and they got to take them home. And then the style changes, and they stop wearing the robe, period, by 1975 with Shirley Cawthron. But the book does talk about what the source was, how she acquired it, and state support does matter.
Yeah.
Texas did well because B. Don Magnus was able to get that money. As you watch the girls and you watch the states that win, it's not actually, interestingly enough, Miss New York has won more often than any other state. But as one of the women said, we have all that support from the New York designers for our clothing that we can go to.
Right. Well, as I continue my research in my secret research area right now, Marian Ann, I will be calling you. We will be discussing things, and I will be sharing things with you because I have lots of questions. Okay, so we have some questions popping up in the chat, and I want to get to those right now for you. So, first of all, and if you have questions in the audience, please post them in the chat to everyone so we can all see them. So not a problem at all. So the first question that we have comes from thank you, Anne. I saw, so Anne has a statement. When we lived in Rhode Island in 1979 to 80, I believe that there was the first time that their Miss Rhode Island got any money at all to help with their wardrobe. So there's that. So then from Linda Pastorino, I apologize. Hi, Marian Ann. When were you at the Met's Costume Institute with Jane? I was there as a college intern and worked under her on the ethnographic costume and jewelry collection in the late 70s and early 80s.
I started, I had a 1-year experience at the Met in the Costume Institute. I started in September of 1985. I met my husband in the galleries on October 1st of 1985 and finished the classwork there in the spring of 86.
Excellent. And then a follow-up question from the same viewer is, in the Texas Tech collection, do you have any ethnographic or indigenous costumes?
No, we
Oh,
do not. We do have an ethnology collection that has some pieces, primarily Native American pieces, but very few ethnographic garments. The mission statement decision and also a statement, a decision about based on the abilities of the people that were on staff at the time. But all ethnographic materials live in another division.
well, I was just going to ask that about, because you're such a large museum and have 9 different divisions. I was going to say, are there, you know, other textiles and garments and objects of dress that are indigenous or ethnographic in another division, and how much do you guys interface on that?
There isn't a full-time curator for that. I mean, the curator for that area also handles archaeology, so her time is really split. Most of what's in there, is not really dress. It's more pots. It's more um, daily objects that you live with, rugs, those sorts of things. And so all of the textiles of these two live with me, which is why I have the military clothing instead of the history curator.
Gotcha. Yeah. Um, and then another question from Rita in the audience. Have you visited Atlantic City, New Jersey, the Convention Center Sheraton Hotel, because they have showcased gowns from Miss America?
Yes. Actually, I was involved in that project early on, and I am familiar with that. A lot of some of the pieces that they had were made as reproductions by Ada Duckett of Arlington when I was first involved with that. And then there was a period of time where the women that, when they won, would give their gown there. As a fashion historian and a curator, I'm not sure it's the best environment, and I'm not, and I really don't know who owns all of those now. But no one has systematically collected the original garments.
And that's actually sort of, for this kind of research, that's actually a very huge challenge. And I say that because as I mentioned before, my nascent research is akin to that. And these gowns and these objects and these garments get scattered all over the place, and tucked away and or forgotten and whatnot. Which reminds me, as we talked earlier, I wanted to highlight the moment where you said that there were 2 gowns in the collection that are currently seeking homes. Should they contact you, and you would help put them in contact with the collector? Is that the best way to do those things?
That is the best way to do that. They are beautiful pieces, and they do need to go to a good historic place that will take care of them. And the women themselves have sort of mentioned how difficult it is to find the right place to give. Jane J. Rowe was lucky in giving it to the Oklahoma History Center, where we had, but honestly, you know as well as I do that it depends on museum staff and if somebody's willing to work with you or not. There's one dress that we did not bring in at all because they had gotten rid of their curator of fashion. That dress was off at an off-site storage area. We were going to have to pay a conservator to go look at it, and a conservator to, of course, tell us how much it would be to fix to come to us. And we just didn't want to get involved in that. So it is important where these things are given, so that they can be loaned in a reasonable situation. As you all know, we pay for fine art shipping that's not cheap. We make sure we have the right facility for them, but it is an important part of America's material culture that should be properly preserved.
Well, and I'm wondering, I have another personal question. In the research that I've been doing, some of these smaller hidden collections that are more remote and run by volunteers who are very well intentioned, have you encountered dresses that are beyond saving? that
Yes.
are either so light faded or in some way that they're just in such, I mean, in my own research, for example, I have encountered a dress that was one day very stunning gown, but has been in a glass case on a wire hanger for about 50 years. And it's just like, okay, whatever
Well,
this little fragment of this dress is left, please don't get rid of it, because this is actually an important thing. But
Well, it's hard because the people that want it permanently exhibited. When Cash gave me her gowns and I took them to the Tennessee State Museum, I was excited about that. But a few years later, I saw her, maybe 5 years later, and she said, "Well, I'm really sorry I gave them to you because they're never on exhibit." I was so lucky that Laurel Schaefer, Miss America 72, was standing right there and heard her and said, "No, Kelly, you don't want them on exhibit permanently because they will be destroyed." I know of one that I was told last week is on permanent exhibit at a small museum. I know of another that that said that their piece was totally destroyed because their local hometown wants it. And their local hometown isn't always capable. And honestly, to be fair, years ago, Marianne Mobley's evening gown was on permanent exhibit at the Mississippi Museum. I saw it in Jackson, and I sent them a letter that said, you really shouldn't do that. And I don't know if it was my letter, but her dress went off of exhibit until it came to us now, and that's why it's in such good condition. So it's hard because the small places say, "Oh, we want to honor our local girl, our local heroine, and we want to put it on permanent display." But as we all know, as costume historians now, you can't do that. And
right.
we know for institutions like that have I know of an institution whose name I can't call at the moment because I can't think of it, but they have a George Washington jacket that he wore. Well, they have a reproduction that they put out most often and rotate it to preserve them. So that is a problem, and it is a challenge for the Miss Americas.
All right, we have a couple more questions from the audience. One is, let's see, from Megan. I will be traveling to Lubbock in March and cannot wait to visit! Exclamation point. It's a beautiful collection. Do you know what exhibits will be on display at the beginning of March?
Both of the exhibits that you saw in the video will be on exhibit at that time. Probably some of the Linda Fisher exhibit will still be up. The needlework tool has to come down in at the end of this month. So that's what I know at the moment. I assume you meant fashion and textiles. I don't know about the art exhibits off the top of my head. And please
Um,
let me know when I can show you around. So email me.
Awesome. And we'll share your email again. Another question from Linda. As you continue your research, or statement actually, the Minnesota Historical Society holds a gown worn by B.B. Shop, Miss America 1948, and several photographs of her and the pageant on their webpage. So there's another research for you.
I think just announced that at the pageant this year. So that was the first I had heard that it had been donated. I think it's a very recent donation, which is why I didn't capture it when I was pulling together this exhibition, regrettably.
Um, this is a fascinating question from Rita. Thank you, Rita. Is there a collection of "Show me your shoes" that is what the audience yells during the boardwalk show?
No, there isn't a collection. And, shoes get worn with so many outfits. I didn't even start down that route. And also, when I started this research, they were not doing Show Me Your Shoes. It started because of men in a bar who could see down into the Cadillac, into the convertibles. And these women who had been in rehearsals all week were just exhausted. So they had comfortable shoes on. They had these gorgeous evening gowns and then these like fuzzy slippers. And that was before the fuzzy slippers were fashionable. And so they started yelling, "Show me your shoes." And then it became a thing. And so now the women really dress their shoes up and hot glue guns on everything on those things to get them sparkly or to have special things on them. And so it is a whole thing that someone else can study.
That's fantastic. What a great story. It's amazing how those events turn into something. Um, there's a congratulations to you and to your students. So exciting to see these mounted on view. Such progress after my visit. Thank you, Laura, for that. And then her question is, do you have a dress that got away or one you wish you could find but haven't yet?
You mean for the museum's collection, I imagine? Um,
Uh, how about for the museum's collection A and for the Miss America exhibit
well,
B? So
for Miss
I'm
When I,
gonna make that a two-part question.
for Miss America, when I was at the Tennessee State Museum and brought in Barbara's evening gown and her wardrobe from Everglades, her swimsuit was long gone. And it was the only time that Catalina, who was the sponsor, had issued a two-piece swimsuit. So I would love to have gotten that for Tennessee, but I didn't. So that's one that got away. It was gone before I got there. And of course, you know, swimsuits, they don't really survive. It's tough to get them there. Um, you know, I try not to think about what I don't have here. So hopefully I still have enough time to get those things in. Sorry, I don't have a better answer.
Awesome. Marian Ann, thank you so much. We've come to our time. This has been such a brief but really fantastic conversation. I so appreciate it. And thank you so much. And to our audience members, please give a big round of applause to Marian Ann Montgomery for her time and effort. And thank you all for attending. Please follow the Costume Society of America on Facebook and Instagram to make sure that you hear about all of our upcoming episodes of Conversations on Dress. And of course, our YouTube channel at Costume Society on YouTube. So in the new year, keep dress alive and fabulous and beautiful for all of us. Marian Ann, thank you so much for your time. It has been just a delight. I look forward to seeing you at our upcoming symposium in May. Fingers crossed, and to give you a big old hug. And the next time I am in Lubbock, Texas, now that I have all of my friends, many friends who went to Texas Tech, I will make sure to look you up when I'm there next.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.